Here we go. So we're ready to start when you are.
Okay, perfect. Welcome everyone. Go ahead and push that for me.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the Policy and Budget Subcommittee meeting. Today is August 25th. We'll go ahead and get started. First item on the agenda is welcome, introductions, and announcements. So I'll go ahead and start with myself. My name is Nicole Green. I am the chair for Policy and Budget.
Justin Van Zerber, Vice Chair, West County.
And then we'll go ahead and go to the screen for the staff members.
I'm Kimmy Aseo from the Office of Reentry and Justice.
Hi, I'm Garyana Youngblood. I'm also with the ORJ.
And then I guess we can go for our public. I almost forgot what to say, Kimmy. It's Friday.
Jill Ray with the Office of Supervisor Canvas.
Susan Woodhouse from the Public Defender's Office.
Welcome, Susan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Do we have any announcements? I don't have any announcements from, well, I'll do, but I'll get into a little bit later. We did complete our April 9th summit, which was a success. We would probably do a better, we would probably do a full report out to full CAB, but I will give some feedback in reference to what we're talking about today from policy and budget standpoint.
Great.
So that was amazing. Justin, do you have any announcements?
No announcements.
Any announcements from Zoom? Counting in my head to 3. I'll take that as a no. Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 2, which is open for public comment on any items under the jurisdiction of the Community Advisory Board and not on this agenda. I'm hearing none. Okay. So we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 3, which is the approval of our minutes from the July 21st. From the July 21st CAP Policy and Budget Subcommittee meeting. It is within the document attachment 1, pages 4 through 6. I'm not sure if the agenda is posted in the chat or not. Kimmy or Garyana, could you share the document?
We don't have chat enabled.
Oh.
Yeah.
We share the document on the.
Oh, hold on, maybe we do. Oh, just joking. Here, let me share it right now.
No problem.
Hey, Garyana, do you think you could share it? Because since I'm remote, I don't have access to the files, the O drive.
Yeah, do you want me to share my screen or just share it in the chat?
I think either is fine.
Okay, I'll share my screen right now.
Nicole?
Yeah, share it on the screen. I want to have, I have to break this apart. I want to have our recommendations next to each other. Perfect. Thank you. Give you, you can go scroll a couple of seconds for anyone to read. And if I get a motion to.
Yeah, I motion to approve the minutes.
I second that. So Kimmy, Justin motions and I second motion. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I guess we just need to vote, but I'm assuming it's both a yes from both of you.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so that's passed unanimously.
Thank you. All right, so let's get down to business. So our next item on the agenda is to review and discuss the full CAB recommendations. So we're going to take a look at it's started on, starting on page 7. So actually, it's pretty much, we're gonna do 4 and 5 together. 5 is to discuss and revise the language or verbiage of the 8109 excess funds recommendations of cap for priority. So what we're gonna do first is just go through and take a look at the recommendations. What I'll probably ask Justin is for those main ones that we're focused on: the housing, behavioral health, and employment. We hold them for number 5, because our goal is to look at the recommendations and compare it to the verbiage that we're using, the 8109 excess funds recommendation,
Okay.
and adjust it. So instead of doing it double time, we can just read through the record, the remaining recommendations, and figure out, do we feel that we still need them? Do we feel like we want to bring some attention to those at the next cap? Because we've solely been focused on those 3 with addition to the pre and post release.
Yeah.
And haven't taken a look at the rest in a while.
Okay.
So I think for item number 4, it's going through the remainder of the recommendations, and our goal is to bring them back to full cap and say, hey, it doesn't seem like you guys still think we need this, or it seems as though we may need this recommendation, let's adjust it. So we can start off with that, if you're okay with that, and
Sure.
then go back to the 3 main ones, which is housing, employment, behavioral health, and then adding on post and pre-release.
Okay.
So we'll hold off on number 1 and come back to that. Which one is behavioral? I'm in order here, so I see 1. Recommendation number 2 is, okay, so we go over to recommendation number 2, which is expand the use of alternatives to incarceration, including diversion and restorative justice programs, and ensure equitable access to these programs. Okay, so give a second for everyone to kind of read through that, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So I believe this is something that we're currently working on and should continue to stay within our recommendation. I believe that there have been some momentum in this, and that it has been acknowledged. I know that this year there has been some things done around restorative justice programs and services have been working diligently on getting that done. So I think it's an important one to keep in there. I don't have any recommendations around changing the verbiage, but it's something I think we can bring back to full cab to get their feedback on, to see if there's any feedback they have on the language, and loop in programs and services. I know because Ozzy has done a few things in reference to programs and services to restorative justice around programming. What do you think after you read it?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe taking a step back.
Okay.
I love the way that this is laid out, where like you have the heading and then you have specific areas that they can invest in,
Okay.
prioritize. And this feels more in the sense of like, they would still have to go back to the budget and to partners to really understand how to bring that to light.
Right.
And I think our voice would be amplified more if we proposed it the way you all did with the excess funds utilization.
So do you think do you think in addition to the way that these recommendations are written out, to have this extra document that breaks it down in that manner like we did for housing, employment?
I don't know if it has to be an extra document. I think maybe it can be blended, right? Because this is really strong, right? I
Right.
think it shows what we want to do, and this is the blueprint of how to do it.
So I'll have to, I'm not sure if they can answer, but I can definitely check with Patrice when she returns. So I know that we submitted to CCP in this manner, and then the way that we wrote it out on that document was an additional support. So I've never asked that question if we could merge it in that manner.
Yeah,
We just requested if we could provide an additional document to explain that verbiage more, and that's how the.
because like who created this? This is
CAB did,
us, right?
yeah, so this was a full document that we created within CAB.
Okay.
And then when we reported to CCP, Crawford and myself asked if we could attach supporting documents for the
Yeah.
same reason that you did, to kind of explain it more on
Yeah.
what we were looking for. But we never asked, I know that I never asked, can we change this wording to write out like that?
Uh-huh.
So that's a very good question. I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that. Drew, I don't know if you know the answer to that, or I can ask Patrice. But yeah, we haven't asked that question, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. This was developed by CAB, and so I would ask Patrice and or Crawford.
Okay. So I'll circle back to Patrice and Crawford at our meeting next week.
Okay.
And see if that's a very good point. I've honestly never thought of that.
Like all of that work we did over the last 2 months.
Right.
Painted a really clear picture of where these departments need additional support.
Correct.
Right? And if we're utilizing that as the driving mechanism for what we want to see done, we should have that documented.
Okay. Okay. That's a good point. So I will table that. So right now, I mean, I definitely agree with you in reference to the way this is written in structure. And I do think that we need an additional, or not additional, but be able to break it down in this manner and not
Yeah.
have two separate.
Yeah.
But I will confirm with Crawford and Patrice if that's something that we can do. I'm not sure if there was a reasoning why this was not combined into one.
Yeah.
I just know that we were when we submitted our recommendation, we were able to do an additional document to submit to CCP, and this was it.
Got it.
So I'll find out and have an answer for you.
Okay, great.
And it's the same as we can move on to number 3. Same here. So we talked about number 2, so we're okay with that. It's just adding an additional breakdown. And not to before I move to number 3, that's exactly in a nutshell what I was thinking, because I'm not sure. I know that work has been done, but it's not broken down like that. So I would love to be able to outline exactly what has been done in that section.
Yeah.
Because I know that we've touched on this recommendation, and that will help us kind of figure out if we need to change some of that, because I know that it's a lot of work that's been done here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
so-
maybe that's something that we could include in here, right? Like acknowledging the steps that have been taken based on CAB's recommendation, right? What I hear you saying is that CCP heard you and they allocated funds to some of these areas to move this work forward, right? And so I think acknowledging that and then saying, now we recognize this happened. We went back out and talked to people and we still want to do
Correct,
X, Y, and Z.
correct.
Yeah,
Okay. And that's the goal. So,
because that's then patting them on the back.
right, so that's a very good point, because what we were going to do was just take out what's been done and reword it, but I think it is a good idea to acknowledge what has been completed
Yeah,
and then figure out what else needs to be done and change the wording. So, okay. Can definitely do that. Okay, let me write this down before I forget. I can't call you and ask.
I know. You got an hour and a half with me, that's it.
Date, what? Any public comment regarding recommendation number 2? See none. Let's make a note here. Moving on to number 3. And that's, yeah, thank you. Give everyone a second to read that. Sure, I'll answer.
Honey, I feel like this wasn't really highlighted
Right, it
in our
was,
conversations. But I don't think I don't, using a double negative. I still think it's valuable.
right,
And I am sure that the individuals who we spoke to would want this to continue to happen.
right.
Um,
So is this still a key factor with this recommendation? Because again, just like with number 2, this is something that is still valuable and important to
Mhm.
CAB. It is something that we are still pushing for.
yeah,
So within this year, t- 3 is one of the items that we are currently still working on that I believe should still be here. Now, again, it goes back to what you pointed out with the second one, right? Is what has been achieved so far,
mhm,
and acknowledging that. What other work do we want to be done?
yeah,
So I think that discussion needs to be held with number 3 because we have touched on this. So I would definitely want to bring this one back for the full CAB, have
Right.
feedback on it as well, so that we can review this recommendation. Just like you said, I think it's the same thing with number 2.
Yeah.
Figuring out what we've touched, what we would like to see going forward and adjust it in that manner, because it's been written this way for a while.
yeah,
So I think it's worth at least going, having this discussion with everyone. I know there's gonna be probably some, it may be some, I'm thinking there may be some adjustments to it, because I know that it's been touched upon, and kind of get everyone's feedback so that we can rewrite or add feedback to that recommendation. Any public comment regarding recommendation number 3? These are not all of them, there's. Please give us a few more. And what I didn't say, so that it's not confusing, you'll notice that it's in there twice, these recommendations, and in the back, there is a longer list. So this first section is the ones that we've been continually focusing on, which is 1 through 6. And then right after that page, you'll see every single recommendation. There's a total of 11.
but
So there-
isn't this, this was from the previous year?
But they're still in our recommendation. We never removed them. Does that make sense? So there's actually been, sorry to kind of go backwards, you guys. I want to explain to Justin all of our recommendations. So we actually have a total of 11, all together.
Okay.
But there was 8 that we were focusing on, 6 that we were focusing on for the past couple of years, which is the ones that me and you are looking at right now.
Okay,
So, out of those 6, when we found out there were excess funds, and then based on the surveys, then we narrowed it down to the 3.
right,
So our main focus have been on housing, employment, behavioral health, and then we added on the post and pre-release. So now we're just going back and saying, hey, is these 6 still valuable? Do we want to adjust those main, a couple of ones we were looking at based on what we wrote in the excess funds, and then go back and look at the other remaining ones and go, okay, the ones that we haven't looked at all, should we remove those?
But these are significantly different.
So let's see here. So we have 11, 10, 9. Oh, I thought she put. So how are they numbered? Yeah, I would tell myself I didn't look at my plans. So
You're
that's
good.
1. Okay. How they changed the wording on it. So we're just glancing through the recommendations and comparing right now. Trying to link them all together because the number is not the same.
Yeah, this is the 2020 CAB survey.
Recommendations.
Uh-huh.
Oh. So it's the same, but it's the same, but worded in a different manner. So this is the 21-22 recommendations. And from these 11 recommendations, these 6 were the ones that we pulled. They're written a little bit different, but these are the ones that we focused on.
Okay.
Okay. So after we focused on those, then we narrowed these 6 down
To these
to the 3.
Uh-huh.
So now we're just kind of, but they're still part of they're still within the regulation as a whole. That makes sense. So they're still there. So we're being asked to go back and look and make sure, okay, I know we've been focusing on these 3.
But we're not resubmitting this.
No, we're not going to resubmit this document, but if we see anything in this document that we still think is important, we want to add it.
Got
So
it.
right now,
Got
we're
it.
focused on
Got it.
our recommendations.
Okay.
So our recommendations that we would submit right now only consist of these 6.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is, do we want to adjust anything from here based on what we wrote for the excess funds, and then look at the back page to say, hey, do we need to bring any of these forward again?
Got it.
Or are
Okay.
they just not a voice?
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah. Got
I
it.
know it's a lot of back and
No,
forth
you're
in
good.
pages, so
That's helpful.
I wanted to make sure I explained it right, because I'm looking like, this is a little bit confusing. Does that make sense to everyone on the Zoom? I know we were kind of having a side conversation. I hope that you all were able to hear me as we were trying to figure this out. I don't see any hands raised. Okay, so we'll go back to it. So I still agree with recommendation number, not agree, but I still think it's important and we should bring that one back. Number 4 is still important, as you can scroll down. It's still important as well. ORJ has put a lot of work forward in reference to data strategies within the Office of Reentry and Justice to improve their data collection. They're continuously working on that and has done a great job. I don't see the reason for removing that, as I know there's still, things to be done. But we could do. I think with these 6 is you made a significant point where I don't think there's any room to change it without us actually looking at what has been done, acknowledging that, and then figuring out what needs to go into the next.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to do. We did.
Like, for me, if this has been done, I don't think it needs to be included,
Right.
because I didn't hear any of this from our conversations.
Just reading over the recommendation. So for recommendation number 4, I would want to check in with RJ for an update. I really like the last sentence where it said this is a major undertaking and require ongoing and longstanding partnership across multiple stakeholders. I still believe that is important. I still believe that is not important, but that is still current right now. I don't believe it's completely done. I know that they put in work to come up with different data strategies, and reporting process to collect data to the stakeholders. So I know that it's something that's still ongoing that they're working on. So it's maybe more of viewing the recommendation and changing the wording of what they've done and what is still needed from their standpoint to collect data. But I know it's something that's still ongoing. So it's getting an idea of what has been done.
But if they're doing it, I don't know that we as a group need to recommend that.
I guess it's finding out, do they need anything else? I guess it's the question
Yeah,
I'm saying.
gotcha, yeah,
So if it's not, then it's saying, okay, this recommendation has been met
yeah,
and they're just working on, and we can notate that. But I think it's important to find out, is there
That's fair.
anything else that I wouldn't know?
right,
So I think that would be a question that we
Yeah.
need to bring to find out, okay, recommendation number 4 looks as though it's been touched on from what we've heard. with
Yeah.
The reporting, and I'm sorry, go ahead, Jill, I didn't see your hand. Just scream at me.
I was just going to say that this is an ongoing effort, and there is discussions right now between ORJ and Health Services to develop a platform to do this. And it comes out of the Familiar Faces initiative. So they're working on a both micro and macro level. So this is definitely pertinent and important. And I think just supporting their efforts, because what you're doing is supporting their efforts in front of all of the department heads. So it just encourages, continual attempts to share data as will be helpful to the reentry population.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay,
thank you for the context.
thank you.
Hey, Gariana, if you can hear us, there's a notification on the screen that says upgrade notice.
The system will restart automatically.
Do you think that's our computer, maybe? Does anyone else see that? It is ours.
I don't-
Fix that.
I don't see it on my end, but if I saw that earlier, I can come in there, but if you can you just cancel it?
It won't.
Let them.
Okay, here I come. Let me see.
All right. Okay, everyone. That's weird, huh?
Sorry about this. Okay, I saw this earlier.
Oh. We were trying to use the mouse.
God, that is-
I did this morning too, and I was like, how does this work? All right, is everything going cool? You might have to use the mouse for that one. Yeah, technology.
Thank you.
So that information you gave us, Jill, actually really helped, because we can look at it from that standpoint. So it's not just moving, but the recommendations are also for support in different areas. So
Yeah.
we can look at, that really helped. So I guess we can keep that in mind as well when we're looking at them.
Okay.
Number 5 and 6 is related to our AB 1 on, or ones that we're going to touch on. So we can go back, kind of go backwards now and look at 1. It's 1, 5, 6, and then we need to add in a recommendation for the post and pre-release.
Uh-huh.
Uh-oh, I did it again.
Oh my.
So if you can go back, to page 7 for recommendation number 1.
I think it's Gariana.
Oh, I don't know which one was carry on.
Gariana.
So let's look at this.
Yeah, I think.
So, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think this is great. I think what I would add is the behavioral health piece.
And that's on,
And I know it's a separate recommendation, but one of the things that I heard that was really standing out to me was that one, we have a lack of housing for these individuals, but then if someone is experiencing substance abuse or mental health concerns, that pocket of available resources is even smaller. And so while we want to advocate for increase of housing, I feel that it's important to advocate for increase of housing and for people with behavioral or substance abuse issues. Like, be explicit about it.
Okay. Agree with that. I do think I also.
It's really hard to
Don't look at it, just.
make 5 steps in today.
Let's see, I do think it's a good idea as well to be able to, so I like the way it's written. I also agree with you in adding in those keynotes regarding the AOD, the AOD and mental health, because those are key components in reference to housing. I would like to also see detail from our excess funds added in there that can elaborate a little bit more on what we're talking about for our recommendations. So I really want to ask that question instead of us having it separated for those three, really pulling in this information and tagging it on within these records, because it really breaks down in more detail of what we're asking for. But that is a good point out that you made in reference to also pointing out for not only are we asking for housing, but there is a need in reference to the AOD and mental health. I especially like the.
If I could just make a quick suggestion, because I don't think you have to add a lot here to include that. You could take it in the, let's see, the end of the first paragraph where it says, as this is the best practice within the housing field and offer flexible housing options in addition to transitional living, including behavioral health and substance use services or something along those lines. You could just add that in there.
And so, okay, I like that. And then the next paragraph where it says more flexible funding will provide people with the support needed at the first hint of housing. Instability, excuse me, I can't talk today. Instability unique to their individual housing needs and prevent from, I can't talk today. And prevent from their nearing the point of crisis to provide a pathway to permanent housing. In that section, we can add in a little blurb of reference to the recommendation of providing transitional bridge housing for reentry individuals. Possibly something right wording from over here.
In the upper paragraph, because that second paragraph is really specific to like the rapid rehousing model.
Okay.
Where you provide funds for maybe first and last month's rent kind of thing, or like that, or supports to get somebody into it or to stabilize their housing. Where I think that other model fits up above when you're talking about the different kinds of housing that are required for this population. I would just like to add also the H3 model. They're really creative in their rapid rehousing. It may not just be rent money. It could be food stabilization money for an existing family member who otherwise couldn't take somebody in if they didn't have resources to provide more food to the household, kind of thing. So it really is a flexible fund to provide people the best and most stable, and encouraging family members and supports as well.
So to get your feedback, so I understand the way that the recommendations are written, and I guess, comparing to how we written it out for like our AB 109 excess funds, I guess I'm just trying to figure out a way, and I guess what we're asking, can we add in verbiage the way we wrote it out for the excess fund where it's just straight to the point of what we're asking for, or does it have to be written in that manner? For someone else, it may be, and I guess for me, I'm just asking for clarity because it could be like, do you get that from reading that, or?
I don't think you do. I think it's too vague.
So is there, and it's just an open question. Do we have to, and it may be a Patrice question that is written in that way, where is that vague, or can we get more in detail with the recommendations? Jill, has it ever been that detailed like that?
The 21.
I think discussion when this was being written up is to have the conversation with H3 to get their recommendations on where expanded housing should be, and you guys have done that. So then you're making a recommendation based on what the experts in the county have said would be helpful. So I think your recommendations are more specific now because you've had those meetings, right?
And I think if you go back through the 21, 22 recommendations, they feel a lot more specific. Like recommendation 3 is saying, and this fund should be created up to $100,000 for dollar match with some of their funding source. Like it's really targeted, specific and direct items that they want to see done. Number 4 is they should explore using the amount allocated to MHET so that up to 3 additional cities receive funding. It's like, it feels like their outreach and their conversations with different departments and the community
Right,
netted these specific requests.
right.
And I feel like that's what we have the opportunity to do now that we've had these conversations with those part of the county as well.
Okay. Okay. Let me pull up my notes. And I can tell you what I got from, okay, so I'm pulling my notes outside of this. What I got from my, from the housing. Go ahead, I think I heard.
The other thing I would add is you all were created because you're the boots on the ground and you really see the need in your day-to-day work. And I think that's important to include that voice, right? Like you see that this specific area is missing. Where, maybe on the higher level, people are looking and going, oh, we have these variety of housing options. But what I've heard over and over again is these variety of housing options are not appropriate for this population. So having your voice in there and your feedback in there is, I think, incredibly important.
So when were we trying to present this to CAB?
So we were trying next month. However, now listening, thank you, Jill. Now listening to Jill and hearing her feedback, what I would have preferred to do was probably go and we kind of like how we did our work plan, read the recommendations, write them and kind of come together. Because I do agree with her, and I'm be honest, I did not have a chance to do that. I do have a summary of what I got back from H3.
Yeah.
For behavioral health and housing, I would like to add. Also, like she said, adding that feedback that we got from the community as well as feedback I know from myself. So now hearing what Jill is saying will help better rewrite and adjust. I didn't come here with that plan.
Yeah, no, it's good.
So I don't know if we'll have enough time to actually go through one by one today and rewrite it in that manner. But now hearing what she said, that kind of helps. So we have to figure out maybe it's us taking each recommendation based on the person that we was assigned to and coming back with our feedback. Because I like for the housing, I can elaborate on that more.
Yeah.
Based on the comments I got from H3,
Yeah.
the comments I got from AOD, mental health, behavioral health. From that conversation, as well as the results we got from summary, and add that extra detail that Jill is saying and bring that back, as well as the behavioral health section. And then you did an employment part. Release we got from, we could both take a stab at that. So it may not be ready for the most, probably the next CAB has talked about the additional ones. That'd be like number 2 and number 3. Get their feedback. Number 2, which was the expanding use of alternatives of incarceration, and then the racial equity lens. Get their feedback on those 2. Because I have to sit down and really read number 1 and think about, read the summary, my own personal from being in that field, the stuff from the community, what I'm hearing, what we've heard from CPOs, and add that extra layers and the same way it was written in 2021 and 22.
Maybe we do this. if we know that we want to make a recommendation for housing, behavioral health, employment, and pre-release, right?
Right,
And we can draft those over the next month
okay,
and come back to the next meeting and walk through them. And if you want me to do the pre-release as well as the employment,
okay,
and then you could do the housing and behavioral health, and we'll
Okay.
split it in half. And then what we could do is, so I'm seeing 3 recommendations from last year that don't necessarily align with those 4.
right,
They're obviously meshed because they're serving the same population. But maybe we bring those to CAB
right,
and say, we're writing these 4.
right.
Do we want to include some of this or none of this or all of this?
Right.
For number 2, 3, and 4.
What do you mean in reference to include?
Do we want these to be included in our recommendation for 23, 24?
So I'm thinking that we would still leave them there.
Okay,
Simply kind of like what Jill said, it's, for example, number is one of them too.
Mhm.
Because it's in supports for CAP. So I don't think we're going to remove them. I think we're still will submit the 6 with addition to adding on the post and pre, right? So we will focus on rewriting the housing, behavioral health, employment, and the post and pre-release, and then go back to full CAP and say, hey, here is what we're working on, but we have these three recommendations, 2, 3, and 4 that we're going to include. So
Yeah.
we need to figure out what has been, done. We want to change the verbiage on this in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Is there any feedback that they want to give, especially for 2 and 3? I like what you said about acknowledging what has been done and figuring out if we want to, if there's anything in addition that was needed for support. So I think these 3 we should bring back to full CAP to get their feedback on it. Number 4, I definitely agree with what Jill recommended, is where this is more of a support in the efforts of what ORJ is doing.
Mhm.
We can definitely ask in full CAP if there's any feedback or change that to be made from ORJ.
Mhm.
But I think for those 3, it's more feedback from everyone because our focus is on the others.
Got it.
I love how we say the same thing but different.
I think-
Just to give you a little context here, so there's 2 things going on, right? So you guys have your recommendations that you think you're recommending be incorporated going forward by the CCP, right? So like you want those partners to make sure that the disabled population is cared for and that there's equity lens and everything that they do, right? On an overall basis. And there's this extra pot of funds. And you all are making recommendations as well on those extra pot of funds. Like these are the areas that we think, those funds should be expended in whatever form it is. And then I was also going to say, timing wise, the budget documents will come out in October. So I think you guys have time to kind of play with this before you take it to the full CAP, because the first budget will be submitted in November. So that will give CAB an opportunity to review and make recommendations in October.
So do you still, and I just, is to get you, I love your feedback. So what do you think about us bringing that number 2, 3, and 4 just to get the feedback at our next meeting?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And just keeping in mind, you're not eliminating those recommendations, but you're sort of highlighting these extra areas for that extra funding. You're kind of pushing those to the top right now, saying we have an opportunity to address these in a real way. The other ones are sort of more theoretical, like we should be considering the disabled population and ensuring their needs are met. We should be doing everything through an equity lens kind of thing, which aren't necessarily financial outlays, just more of a how we do business. And then of course the data thing, like we should all be sharing data.
Thank you, Jill. That's 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so our goal again is to, I'll take the housing and behavioral health, you'll take the employment and pre-post release.
Mhm.
So that's gonna be added. That's gonna be a new one. We can work on that within, like I said, we have until October to really bring those back to full cap, so that give us
But
September.
we meet after.
I know, that's why I just said
next
September.
month.
So, that'll be an action item to bring back for,
Next month.
yeah. Okay. Action item for September for policy and budget, and then, in October, full cap. And then in the meantime, at our October one, we will review 2, 3, and 4. Got it.
I'm just giving myself a note.
Yeah, I write it and then I go home and I put it all over my calendar. So I can set time to do this. Okay, perfect. Okay. Any other public comment? On any of the recommendations or discussion that me and Justin just had regarding the recommendations. And again, thank you, Jill, for your input. I guess we can use the last one, 2021, 2022. As something to kind of refer back to, and if you see anything on there that kind of stands out,
Yeah.
we can bring it back to our September.
Okay.
I'll have to go through all of it again too. Okay. All right. Is there any other comments regarding the full cab recommendations? Seeing none, I'm going on to number 5, which was discuss and revise the language or verbiage of our AB 109 excess funds recommendations, caps for priority areas. That is attachment 3 on page 20 pages 20 and 24. We kind of, as I mentioned, we kind of combine that with number 4.
Great.
So there really isn't any verbiage to that we're changing on there, but we can go ahead. If you can go to page 20.
But this is what we're going to incorporate into the new recommendation.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's what we kind of did them both, as I mentioned. So we don't have to really go through this because Justin and I are going to actually look at those key areas that I just mentioned, which is the housing, behavioral health, employment, pre and post release, and kind of get some of that verbiage from that, as well as our individual meetings with county programs to update our recommendations.
Gariana or Kimmy, are you able to send both the 22-23 and the excess funds documents in Word document to both of us,
That'd be really helpful.
please?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you so much.
Next. I will ask this. I know that we're going to go over our summary of our notes, which is number 7 in a minute. But looking at our recommendation to CCP, was there anything that kind of stood out or need to be enhanced or changed based on the feedback that we've heard so far? And I'll give a summary from housing and behavioral health in a second, but so far everyone was pretty much in agreement with what we were asking about. I really again like that comment you made a moment ago about adding in the housing regarding AOD and mental health, because across the board housing is a major issue. And it's needed for both mental health and AOD, right? So I think that that's important. I mean, that was all I continue to hear was speaking with everyone from public defenders, from H3, from behavioral health. Even from the employment standpoint, the first thing that everyone acknowledged was housing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's layered through here. But one thing I think we should highlight a little more explicitly is like flexibility of funds. I think it was raised in behavioral health and all three actually, not pre-release, but the other three that like, there are things that come up that don't fit into a grant bucket. And
Right.
so we're expected to support this individual every way we can, but we don't
Right.
have the
funding
flexible funds to do that. And so I think, and I know the county is not gonna love that, but like identifying some way that we can provide more flexibility or funds, or asking them to document what items aren't able to be funded and figure out a way to do that, right? Like, is it a pot of funds for these discretionary items?
Okay. That outline what? Outlining what can't be. That sentence.
Yeah, outlining like what can't, isn't able to be, what did I say? Like the,
So I think, so I know that in some other contracts, for example, like AB 109, it may not outline what can't be, but it outline what can. So it, you know exactly what population or who initially can be served by that bucket of money, and depending on the amount of individuals who may be able to have access, or what is the process to be able to use that. So I don't know if that's outlined in every single type of contract, but I know in this one is usually outlined. I think more of the question is, you made a good point on, for those that cannot be served under that contract, where can those funds come from? Also, what I heard is, there isn't a lot of pool of money, even if there is room to be able to utilize that bucket for additional individuals, like with AB 109, you are able to, if needed, to use that for other tiers, right?
yeah,
But the issue is there isn't enough
right.
to be able to help everyone. So I think the idea is, where can we get more funds from, or like you said, looking in ways to be able to find that excess support. So, or I just think, having that, like we mentioned in our recommendations, being able to use the funds outside of the just not for anyone that falls to just impacted.
Yeah.
And not just not limited to individuals that fall under 819 probation. So I think that that's really important, in looking at different ways that we can utilize that funding. Looking at those gaps to be able to fill them and figure out where that money can come from, I think it's extremely important. So I would add those here. And
I don't know where this would fall.
before you say that, does D, maybe we can elaborate that on D, like for example, under housing, it says use local innovative fund resources to support creating housing programs for justice involved, maybe add.
Where are you reading?
Oh, page 2.
Individuals with disabilities.
With disabilities and fixed income. Never mind, I'm trying to find a place to.
I mean, it might just be like an overarching.
Rather than the
In the blurb,
recommendations.
yeah.
Okay.
Because all of them want it.
So you're correct. I'll make a note when I'm doing the update for the recommendations and probably include it in.
Okay.
I know it says flexible funds in there, but just elaborate a little bit more on
Yeah.
those, all of them
Yeah.
across the board.
And then I think the only other thing that I heard that I don't see here is with regard to the employment resources. And that was, and again, maybe this is across all of them, but like just giving people money, right?
Right,
Like, here's $1,000 on a monthly
Right.
basis. So like, I don't know if we want to recommend that they try to pilot something like that, that's going up, like similar to Alameda County.
right.
And utilize some of these funds to pilot that and evaluate that and
Right.
see if that can be a longer term type of investment.
Let me see what,
Just so you know, the Board of Supervisors is looking at various models and contemplating a guaranteed income. There's several pilots they're launching. There was just a presentation of the Board of Supervisors, and the Employment and Human Services Division is opting into one of the laws that allows them to not consider the guaranteed income in how do I say this? So if somebody earns a certain amount, you know, there's those wobblers that if they earn just a little bit more, they won't qualify for benefits.
Yeah.
And so there's a regulation that can be passed and adopted by the county, which the Board of Supervisors just did, so that those people who are wobblers and who, if they participated, they would lose their benefits, they will not now. So the Board of Supervisors is looking at it. There isn't enough data at this point in time. Stockton, I think, is the longest running program in this area, and that was just launched in 2021. There is an Alaskan pilot that has been long-term, and so the county is looking at different ways to do that using other funds. So it might be a bit premature for you to recommend something like that, given they're already looking at that. I think just keep your eye on that one.
Are they doing it for a certain population, you know?
What's that?
Are they prioritizing a certain population?
Well, so that's the thing, is every pilot is different. Alaska actually pays the money to every single resident in the state of Alaska. And so it's really like prioritizing what population would they look at. And, you know, the good things that came out of Alaska are childhood obesity was reduced. The healthy index for kids has increased. And also the guaranteed income project did not impact employment rates. In other words, people continued working. So those are three very interesting statistics that came out of that one. But yeah, so that's the thing, is what population, where would they do it? Concord is doing it. So we're looking at them, and it would need to be developed to determine what would be the population in Contra Costa County.
and to add to that, from our 8109 summit, Santa Clara is doing it as well. So I think I wrote it down. They are doing, and forgive me, I forgot the name of it, but they have for their post and pre-release from when they're working with the district attorney's office for the justice impacted individuals actually come out and they go into diversion. That's what it's called, diversion program. So they actually come out and go into like a short-term housing, get employment while they're getting referred to other programs. So that was, we could table that. I know that there's more information that we're collecting from other counties as well, but that is another example, Jill, of someone that presented that they're actually doing it as well. Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole table that was presented. I think Stockton has been longest in this area.
Let's see, I'm about to join more calls. Okay. Any questions or feedback regarding, thank you for that, Jill, the AB 109 Access Fund recommendations? Okay. So for number 6, we will go ahead and table that. I did check in with Patrice. She is still looking into that in reference to possibly changing our subcommittee meeting. She's still working, looking into the reaching out to Anita. So as of right now, we will keep our meetings the same. They will not be changed until we hear back from Patrice. And that is on page, I'm so sorry, that is on page 25.
But we changed next month.
Mhm, that is on. Let me change it to. September 22nd.
I might be going out of town that day.
Okay.
I will email.
What is this? 22nd or 20? It's 21st. Nope, I'm looking at the wrong one, 22nd. So we may need to change that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm in. They can connect with you. Why did we move it from the 15th? You had something.
No, another meeting is coming up. I think Anna, what was on the 15th? The
It
reason we
was-
moved.
It was a conflict with another meeting. I'm not 100% sure what the other meeting was, but there was a meeting scheduling conflict. That's why we pushed you guys to the next week.
Thank you.
Calendar up, so just in case, what's the next?
The
Okay,
29th.
okay. We'll be okay for that if we have to. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. So Garyana, Justin will reach out to you. We may have to move the 22nd.
Okay. I'll make a note and we can, I guess, talk about it further in the agenda planning meeting.
Okay. Now we can go ahead and move to number 7, which is the brief CAB discussion with our county partners at the July and August general CAB meetings. So kind of discuss the feedback that we received from our general CAB meeting, also, you know, from our one-on-ones. Outside of, it was really great conversation at both of our CAB meetings, and I had a one-on-one with behavioral health, which included mental health as well as AOD. And then I had a conversation with H3. I was able to talk to a few different staff members there. So I did like a little summary of the feedback that I got from them that we can, we kind of talked on a little bit earlier. Everyone still talked about housing, but I wanted to give you some key points on the feedback I got from them. So from behavioral health, one of the key things that they talked about, which we've heard before, which was staffing and care planning for post and pre-release. We've heard that from within our survey where individuals talked about staffing has always been a number one. And ensuring that they have the proper staffing from both a mental health standpoint and an AOD to be able to assist individuals that are post and pre-release. There is a need for additional housing options, as we talked about before, from both parties, from mental health and AOD. AOD is part of it. They do have individuals that, of course, Fatima talked about, that are working for pre-release, but having those bridge housing for those that may, one of the key things that I know that CalAIM is addressing, and there are other county departments that are looking at, but those that don't have Medi-Cal, or there's issues with Medi-Cal, maybe their Medi-Cal is a different county, they need AOD treatment, and AOD can assist them where they do with them. We know that housing is a major issue right now, so people are getting released without in places to go or the support. So what is that in between?
Yeah.
And also just hearing from community, that is a major issue. There is, that bridge is one of the key things that is missing.
Yeah.
So people are getting released without any type of support and housing that need treatment. There is a great need around court curing capacity. So there is work being done with mental health and AOD, working more together. One of the key things that Fatima talked about, and she did mention that full CAB, was how mental health has more support than AOD. So I know that there is a lot of things that are in the works from an AOD standpoint, but really focusing on those with co-occurring disorders. There is a major gap in that. How do you support those that have both AOD and mental health? So being able to assist both of those. We just talked about that. AOD felt that there needed to be a wide range of housing options to address different barriers. So, and I believe that we talked about that at the meeting, there is a big disconnect in reference to everyone speaking with each other, right?
Yeah.
So being able to address someone's all of their needs in a nutshell, their mental health, their AOD, if they're re-entry, whatever the case may be, being able to address all of those different barriers. They would like to see everyone online providers trained in NorCal. Hopefully I'm saying that right. NorCan, thank you. I'm like, I think I typed that wrong. I don't think it's NorCal, but NorCan. Fatima did talk about how some of the providers are already being trained on that. Medication assistance. I realize that is a need, and also being someone that works inside from Medi-Cal. I can't wait to see that be addressed. I know there is work in reference to addressing those things, but there are a lot of individuals that are not being assisted due to them not having Medi-Cal within Contra Costa County. So there is a major gap. Individuals are leaving jail without their medication. Yeah, they are. And they're only provided with like a limited supply, and due to them not having Medi-Cal here, they're unable to get that medical or that medication. So I know that there's work that's being done right now for that. And funding towards supporting the LGBT, I want to say that wrong.
LGBTQ.
Thank you. And Latino population. And one major thing I've heard across the board, not just with behavioral health, but also speaking with the public defender's office, is the language barrier. So getting staffing assistance for individuals for other languages. So there is a big language barrier for Latinos, especially while they're in custody, that they're not being able to get service because there is that language barriers, or CBOs and or providers don't have the proper staffing to be able to provide assistance for that. And then from a mental health standpoint, one of the key things I really love that I heard was funds toward a diversion program, which I mentioned. Going back to our April 109 summit, it was really nice to hear or see that another county was actually doing that, and actually learn from another county. They talked on, we'll bring that to full cap, but they talked on how the programming is working with the district attorneys for diversion. And that's one thing that we're not doing here. I'm not saying that we're not, but maybe it's something we're working on, but I haven't seen it yet. So to be able to have a diversion program, another thing that stood out, which I really was honest, I was happy that they were honest about, they would like to see more cultural training. So they would love to be able to see their staff train on the culture of individuals in custody. Yes, they know how to go to individual with mental health. They don't know the culture of how they think, how they feel. So when staff goes inside to work with someone that's in custody, they don't know that part. They don't know how to help that individual. They do know the mental health, but how do I relate to someone that is serving time? Because a lot of individuals that may work with them may not have that experience, which leads into hiring more staff with lived experience. So they would love to be able to have, to be able to hire individuals with more lived experience to work with those that are in custody and out of custody, because they can relate more to those individuals. More nursing staff, and then more Cal Mesa alignment of behavioral health that are in custody and out of custody. And then build training so one of the key things, we're building training and trust with the population in custody and medical inside to be able to provide more treatment. So they feel like there is a dislink between the detention centers in relation to mental health programs and AOD. So a lot of feedback around the pre and post release area of it. Even though it's not included on there, same thing from the meeting I had with the public defenders, same thing.
Yeah.
Being able to have better housing options, being able to have more collaboration for those that are in custody, for their staff to be able to have more staff, for the public defenders to be able to work with individuals while they're in custody, and their social workers as well.
Yeah.
So I was hearing the same thing from a post and pre-release standpoint, more collaboration, more of individual sharing and talking. I think that's one major thing missing within the county is we're all doing the work, we're all not talking to each other. So how can it be more streamlined? I think recommending those work groups is a key part, and involving all key players at the table to be able to work together. I know there is some red tape in reference to that. They mentioned like ROIs, AOD have certain ROIs that have to be signed to share information, so being able to understand what that red tape looks like to be able to share that information is important. So that was feedback that I got around that area. In addition, from a housing standpoint, same thing, from H3, recommendation for behavioral housing, at-home plan for just and involved land. So being able to have, same thing, more staff. I wanted to add it, but there was a part on there that was very important. Did I write it on here? At-home plan for just and involved. And where was it? Of course, more staffing, housing navigators. There's one that was really important. I'm sorry if I didn't write it down. And I didn't. It was more, I'm gonna see if I can remember. It was more around that wraparound service. So they also recommended for the additional housing for like the behavioral health as well. H3 touches on the homeless population as a whole. And I don't want to say it incorrectly, but they were referencing having that wraparound staff. So it's very important. Yes, you house somebody, but ensuring that you have the staff to continue working on their barriers. So their focus is, of course, rapid rehousing, getting someone housing now. But once you have someone housing and you identify what their needs are, maybe that person has more behavioral health issues, maybe they have more LD issues, maybe they have other barriers. Now being able to have that staffing, that case management to focus on those housing needs, to be able to get them into better housing. So I know that there is some work that's being done with that they mentioned. There is some talk from H3 level, they're looking into that. So again, that's in my opinion where those work groups come in to kind of identify what is each person doing, and how does that assist, now I don't want to say impact, because it does benefit our population as well. And how does our population gain those services also. They did give an example of long-term housing, which is example of the pilot, which is the shallow subsidy program. So how can they get additional funding for something like that? Not sure if you heard of. So there was a shallow subsidy program that went through H3 through CORE, where they had like a little hotel, and they could provide some additional housing to individuals that went through CORE. So that program, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, but I believe that program is coming to an end if those funds ran out. I did join the last call that they had. So how, that'll be an example of a pilot that was put out that was successful, how additional funds go towards something like that, or be able to utilize something of that nature, and use more pilots such as that to be able to figure out housing is needed. And then more landlord engagement, family resources, which is really cool. So we heard that as well as at our AB 109 summit that other counties actually have a lot of family resources. So while individuals are in custody, they're actually working with families to try to get them established and prepared for when that person comes out.
That's great.
Talked about CalAIM. Some hot topics they're looking at is homeless prevention. Why are there more homeless people now? And I think that was, oh, and I know that I'll leave that for some follow-up items at the end, but I did make a note of something that we talked about at our meetings that I know that I forgot about, which was we did ask for behavioral health and housing to give CAB their data, how many, what was it, number of unmet individuals for both.
Yeah.
And I totally forgot about to follow up on that. And I don't know if they gave that to CAB or not, but we were asking them for information for unmet need of how many were unmet.
Yeah.
How big is the issue, and then any data reports they already have, because we were asking for data. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna note on my report for that.
Okay, great.
I'm done. That was my summary.
That's awesome.
Any questions or feedback
No,
or anything?
I think it's great that you took the time to reconnect with them individually, right? I
Okay.
think that we had a great presentation and connection when they came to CAP, but obviously there are more layers that you uncovered by carving out that time. So thank you for doing that.
So I think what I'm going to do, and again, Jill, I'm gonna keep saying that because your comment earlier really helped me. I was having a hard time of pulling all this together and going, okay, what do we do next? So that comment actually helped me. So it goes back to what Jill said earlier with me doing the housing and behavioral health. I'm going to take all of that information I got back from them, the survey, what we heard from the community, and in our recommendations, add that information in there.
Awesome.
Because I did not do that.
Yeah.
So I was like, what do I do with all this data? So that actually helped me kind of answer my own question. So
Yeah.
I'm going to take that summary with that recommendation and add that real touch to it and their feedback in there.
That's awesome.
And let me also ask, have you seen the point in time count report that came out, the comprehensive report that came out from H3 just recently?
Ma'am.
Did you say yes?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
There might be some information in there that could also, I haven't looked at it. So there might be some information in there to answer some of those questions about the connection with reentry.
Great, thank you.
So I did look at it, and this was one question that I posed to H3. So the data is wonderful. It does talk about like the number of homeless and, you know, in reference to their barriers. But one question that I've constantly had, I know that they're working on it, is identifying those within the population that are just impacted. So I know that one of the things they brought to me is they have acknowledged that is one section that they want to cover. They do try to ask that question. I know on the assessment that they use, or what they use, their H3 system that they use, they're trying to incorporate more questions around that. But that is some data that I've asked on one of their calls before, is how many, is there like actual data that actually identifies how many of the population that has been touched through the pilot is just impacted. I'm not sure if they actually have that full number, but I know it's something that they're looking into. So I'll go back and look at, I don't think I've seen that, because I know it's an ongoing thing that they're trying to work on, that they identified previously, that I don't want to say that was missing, but they identified it may have been a gap. They do know that they touch
Yeah.
the just impacted, but it's not something that's just like outlined, or here's a number that we know that are. It's not a question that they just go out and just, hey, have you been in jail? Kind of question. So
That's a
go ahead.
I'm wondering if they might be able to pull that info from the jail database, because H3, you know, has detention health, and then also the sheriff now has a database. So I'm wondering if they could pull those numbers on how many people incarcerated and being released are reported as homeless. That might also be a different way to get that number.
Sheriff's data. So I didn't know that. So you said they have a detention, last part?
So health services runs detention mental health, right?
Right.
So, or I mean, detention health, not mental health. Well, both mental health and health. So detention health is run by health services. So I don't know if they capture that data for their clients that are incarcerated, whether or not they're homeless, but there must be somebody must capture the data, because otherwise where do they release them to? Right?
They want me to answer that?
No, I mean, I'm saying, so like, wouldn't they have to track that? You know, and probation also might have that. If they are referred to probation, they might have a, you know, a data set that shows how many of their clients are unhoused.
That's a good question. That's a very good question. So I would like to know, do they track that in custody? And that is a good question. I don't know if they.
That would be like self-reported too, though, because
Right.
someone might say that they're living with an
Right.
auntie or uncle, or
It wouldn't be like accurate data. So I mean, it's I guess for me, it's more from the pit count. What I wanted to know from like H3 is, so one of the things I identified myself and I asked H3 and is, a lot of individuals that are counted in PIT are Justin impacted. Those are the same individuals that we touch. So how do they identify those that are being counted as homeless are also Justin impacted?
Mhm.
So I don't know if someone, I know that that's something that they have been trying to work on, identify, especially like with the VIASPA, that making sure that it's more, I don't want to say more friendly, but really working on capturing that data. I don't think it's something that's being captured now. If I'm incorrect, please correct me. But that's always been a question that I've asked, is how can we identify how many of those homeless actually fall within our population? We know that they do, but is that being captured? So that'd be something we can request from RJ in reference to the data for detention health from the sheriff's office or probation.
Yeah, I would have a conversation with Patrice, because I think there's a variety of areas that you can cobble together information. It may not be complete, but at least it'll give you a picture, because not everybody who is released is on probation. Some
Right.
might roll. But if they touch the homeless system of care, I'm surprised that they didn't ask that question, because I could have sworn in talking about what questions to ask, I asked for that question to be in there. So I'm wondering
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
if they have the data or if they just didn't include it in the report.
I'll go back and take a look. I don't want to say that it's not there. That was just a question that I've had for them.
Right.
When I did my call with them, I know that was an area that they were looking on, and I actually agreed with collecting that data. I'll go back and look and see if it's there, but I know the last report I didn't see it, and that was one of the things that made me ask them from a personal, not personal, but from experience with working in housing and doing PIT. That was always an area that I didn't see captured that I wanted to know, because the Justin impacted does fall into that homeless category. But I never seen the numbers counted or captured to see how many of the homeless actually are Justin impacted. I'll go back and look again. It's a pretty website. It's a pretty report.
Flipping through the report, and they capture veterans, but I didn't see that they captured that question. So I can also reach out to them and just ask if they asked that question, because I could have sworn when we were going through the questions to ask, but they might have dropped it. Who knows?
I appreciate you asking for it to be added, because that has one that's been on my radar. Is including that question, because I think we'll learn a lot. I truly believe that we all touch the same individuals, and that will actually show how many of our Justin impacted population is actually within that homeless report. And I think that that's a very important number, because we're talking about housing. Everyone is needs housing, and it is a significant amount of those individuals that are homeless are those that are released from jail. So that is
Automatic impediment to getting housing, right? Having injustice involved. So yeah.
You need summary for employment.
No, I didn't meet with, I just had them come to the larger cab.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really love the conversation around the employment. I think that in addition to what we've added on to our recommendations for the excess funds and for CCP, I think one of the key things is trying to figure out exactly what you said earlier, like a pilot. How do we get income for someone right now?
Mhm.
So I'm happy to hear that is being looked at to see what other counties are doing. I love the fact that we had our summit, because there's a lot of ideas that were brought to the plate on what other counties are doing. As I mentioned, Santa Clara is doing the diversion program. In Solano, they mentioned that they have actually a reentry center that probation kind of helps and runs. They put on their probation hat, then their case management hat.
Nice.
So there are a lot of things being done in other counties we can look at. I do like one of the things that Dante Blue brought up that doing in Alameda County. So how do we see that here?
Yeah.
And how do individuals walk out to ensure that they have some kind of income to prevent them from going back to what they know, right? So if someone can't get money in their pocket immediately or within a decent amount of time, they're going to go back to what they're
Fast
accustomed
money.
to, fast money,
Yeah.
because they just survive. So it's identifying that and how we can better streamline that. Did have a great conversation with the Public Defender's Office yesterday regarding different employment. Hearing how they're doing expungements and different things of that nature, just to help the clients was really great. So, and then open it up to where they can actually have real jobs with a little bit of income. I think one of the key things that was pointed out is how much someone needs to make in order to actually survive. Here in Contra Costa County, it's about $43 an hour.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, how to increase them wages for individuals. Right now, someone that's coming out of incarceration is making probably like minimum wage, right? So how do they make a little bit of income so that they can actually sustain a living and not go back to fast money, quick money?
Yep.
So excited about that. Any public comment on that?
Jill, I have a question. One of the things that Dante, you might not have the answer, but one of the things he brought up was the limitation for previously incarcerated people to get a county job. Was there truth to that?
Well, so I mean, certain jobs, right? There's everybody who's a county employee has to go through a background check. And so there's some discussion that has been started about, first of all, we don't do check the box, right? We don't, that's already been eliminated in the county, but there's certain, you're not going to become a probation officer if you have a criminal background. So, but there are areas of the county which perhaps, just like we talked about this before when CalWorks was rolled out, we brought employees in through the CalWorks program. So there's some discussion, and there are some areas we already do this, but it's just looking at how do we do this more robustly.
And can that be part of a recommendation to CCP?
Yeah, I think you guys have had that conversation at some point,
Okay.
but I'm not sure where it landed. At the CAB level, maybe, because we've had this conversation before about,
Okay, I'll make sure to include that in my write-up then.
So I know it's
Thank you.
in our find it.
It's okay, because I'll include it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know it's written a certain kind of, it's in our recommendations for the excess funds.
Okay.
Hey, Nicole, real quick, I just want to bring attention to the time. I'm not sure if you want to add a few more minutes. It's 12:30.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. Is everybody okay with the time? You okay with it? Just a few more minutes and then we can kind of go.
Sure, just do next steps.
Yep, do the next step. So let's go ahead, and before I go, I did have a question. I don't know if you know, Jill, but I know in San Francisco, they said they're trying to pass an additional law in reference to employment regarding like the backgrounds. I have to look at, do you know anything about that?
I don't know, but I just Googled really quick, can an formerly incarcerated individual be hired by Contra Costa County? And so what pops up is the Workforce Development Board of Contra Costa County, and they do work with individuals who are in reentry, and that's Charles Brown, I think, gave a presentation briefly on that. That's through our Employment and Human Services Division. So there is an opportunity to do that. It's just whether or not we have positions within the county that we really work toward filling or providing is the part I don't know.
Good.
We'll just come back and add it to the recommendations and the notes. But I know some of the feedback was like the workforce development is great. And we did have what banned the box. But one of the things that was pointed out is in reality, we know that, regardless of ban the box, once someone pulls that background and see that someone has charges, at that point is their discretion if they're going to hire the individual or not. And I know I didn't write it down, and I have to go back to our notes. I thought it was in our breakdown here, but it's not. They're trying to pass some kind of law in San Francisco to help with that for employers. And I don't want to say it's wrong, but that gap has, that not gap, but that barrier has been identified.
Yeah.
Even though we have those things in place, when it gets to the HR level, that person can still, you know, not been given that opportunity based because they have those charges. So how do we help them get past that?
Yeah.
And I don't want to put it wrong, so I have to go back and see exactly what they said, but I can tell you as someone with experience,
Yeah.
it does still stop
Yeah.
when you get there. It does. And there's like different things you have to go through in order to even get that position. So it's how do we make it easier for someone?
Yeah.
And then it kind of drags along. So, okay. So due to time, any other feedback regarding those recommendations before we move on to, I'm gonna read the screen. Next steps.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the timing. None? Okay, so let's go over to our next steps. So one of our next steps is I will go follow up with Patrice and Crawford around your question in binding in a sense. Or if there was a reason why this is like a separate to our recommendations and versus it being included within.
Right.
So I'll find out about for that. However, outside of that, the next step is we are going to split the recommendations. So I'm going to take housing and behavioral health. You're going to take employment post and pre-release. And then we're going to come back to our September policy and budget meeting with our updated recommendations and have a discussion on that.
Great.
We're going to take our from the recommendations number 2, 3, and 4 to full cab.
Yeah.
To get their feedback on those. When it comes to recommendation 2 and 3, we want to discuss to figure out, after reading that, what has been done, point out and change the verbiage to acknowledge those things that have been completed, and if needed, adjust the wording to for anything that we may want to add into addition.
Yep.
Number 3, we want to leave that there as it's more of a support for ORJ, but still have a discussion on to see if there's anything that we want to change on that.
Yep.
And then our goal will be, once we have a discussion in September on our recommendations, is to bring them all back to full cab in October.
Yep.
Then I missed. I will also go and review Joe's recommendation to review the pit count for data. I'll also ask Patrice about that last point I made, collecting data from behavioral health regarding their, what did I say? It was, sorry. The last question I had, we were pending items requested from CAB for the number of unmet in reference to behavioral health and housing. So I'll go look at the pit. And then Jill, you was gonna follow up with H3 regarding the question for collecting information for the just and impacted for the pit count.
Yeah, and I already sent that email to Jamie, and I CC Patrice on it, and they're both out of office till Monday, so but they do have that.
Quick. Okay. Ariana, did you, I know I just went through those. I'm sorry, did you get the notes for the next steps?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm sorry. I should acknowledge and ask you as I was just going down my list. Did I miss anything?
No, just, do we have any update about Lanita Gariana?
We reached out to her regarding like participation in her engagement within CAB, and we haven't heard anything back about it. I can follow up with Patrice to see if Lanita reached out to her personally, but so far we haven't heard from her.
I think the only concern there is, like, I think she's at 2 or 3 missed.
Correct.
And like, do we want to shift someone from another subcommittee here to kind of rebalance things?
So that would be something we have to bring to full cab, but as of right now, I did check in with Patrice. She said for us to act as if it's just me and you going
Okay.
for it right now, and to they follow up with Lanita. So as of
Okay.
right now, it's 2 of us for the committee.
Got
And
it.
she is going to check in with Garyana regarding how many are missed
Yeah,
and.
because do we have a subcommittee that has 4?
I believe that,
No, I think,
No.
so as of right now, it would just be me and you. So
Alright.
it'll be a committee of 2.
So we can't miss.
No,
So we
so we
don't
can't-
get mistakes.
We can't miss it. We'll have to move it around the best way that we can.
All right.
We are chucking through in
And
August.
and Jill, was there, I think many months ago, you had said something about subcommittees maybe being able to go virtual for volunteer boards. Was there any movement on that?
Yeah, no, so that bill, they added a bunch of stuff into it and basically made it no different than what you have right now. So it got held over to be a 2-year bill. So there's no movement on that at the state legislature.
Oh, that's state legislature. Okay, cool. Thank you.
But I would think even if, just say, for example, if we had to miss, say for September, if we do, we have our items.
We can't,
We can't. No, I'm just saying that if we can, but we can't.
maybe we'll take October off.
Well, no, because so and also to give you, another action item. Sorry about that. Next step is for the budget. So I will be meeting with Patrice to go over the budget. So hopefully I can have an update for the next one, because after our recommendation, we do need to get to the budget.
Got it.
So I am going to meet with her so I can get started on that.
All right.
So I can't miss anything.
We're not missing. We're hanging out.
So we're hanging out. So, is there any other feedback or questions from anyone on Zoom? I don't see any public comment. Nope, okay. So if that's it, then we will adjourn to our next meeting, which would be, as of right now, it is set for September the 22nd at 11 a.m.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.